we want to talk about the internal structure of the organ that we have inside our skull, which when we're dead is basically just a blob of fat. Seemingly doesn't do very much, but when we're alive, it does what seems to us to be a lot of things because we have this notion of experience. We have a consciousness and we feel that we are experiencing the world around us. We have feedback with the world around us, especially with other people. We have a theory of mind. We think what other people are thinking, or at least try to. We wonder about what other people are thinking. When we experience consonance, which is the mutual resonance of two consciousnesses, we feel very strongly that we know what other people are thinking, and it makes us feel very good.
I'm quite interested in the topic of consonance.
When we are in mutual resonance with another consciousness, that is when we feel our theory of mind working in the best possible way. And theory of mind is just another aspect of experience in general, okay? It's an expansion of experience. We don't just experience our own inner world. We also experience other consciousnesses, other beings in our world.
Fair enough.
And we know that there are generally two types of fatty kind of cells inside this organ. One kind is called glia, and the other is called neuron or nerves. And nerves have a very peculiar structure, which I've always wondered about because they have lots of inputs and generally only a single output. So what is going on? I mean, how does that make sense? You know, it's a cycle of information that's circling around and around and interacting back with the environment, but more goes in than what comes out if you look at the single neuron level.
Right.
So what is that? What's going on? Well, that's abstraction. Abstraction is like zooming in and zooming out at the same time because you throw in information in order to focus more on the information that you're interested in. So you're thinking more about less, which is basically another word for focusing.
Right.
And that is actually structurally implemented by the way that neurons have many dendrites which flow into a single axon. So they collect information from the dendrites. When enough dendrites get to a level where they excite the neuron into firing, it fires out of the axon. The way neurons are set up in the brain is very much like Michelangelo's picture in the Sistine Chapel, where it's Adam reaching out to God and their fingers are almost touching. And that is how neurons are suspended inside the glia, with the axons almost touching the dendrites into which they feed their information, but never actually touching them. Forever suspended in that almost, but not quite. And they do, however, fire these little molecules across called neurotransmitters, which is what they actually do use to communicate with one another.
Okay.
And for a long time, it was thought that single types of neurons fire only one single type of neurotransmitter, and that there were serotonin neurons and dopamine neurons and glutamate neurons and GABA neurons, etc. Today we know that that's not entirely precise, but we are going to preserve that old notion of single type of neuron, single type of neurotransmitter in order to be able to invoke a rule of thumb, which is when do you not mix certain pharmaceuticals with certain recreational or non-pharmaceutical drugs? And my answer to that question, which is a really important question, I think, to a lot of people, is that when the two substances that you are introducing into your brain are working on the same subsystem of neurons and the same subsystem of neurotransmitter, then you shouldn't mix them. But when they are working on different subsystems, and people actually do. You can see people that combine downers and uppers, like the famous
Speedball, I think it's called.
where you use heroin and cocaine at the same time. And that's not as dangerous as using alcohol and GHB at the same time. Why? Because alcohol and GHB both work on the GABA subsystem, whereas heroin works on the opioid subsystem and cocaine works on dopamine. So they don't really interfere with one another. It's kind of like if you've got a school and you want to introduce more students, but you don't want to be disruptive. So if there are already, let's say it's a high school and there's grade 9 students there, if you introduce more grade 9 students, you'll probably be disruptive. But if you introduce grade 12 students, they probably just won't interact with each other at all. So that is a rule of thumb that can keep things in check. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say today.
Cool. So if I get it right, if you do not mix substances that work on the same subsystem, that is recommended by you not to mix things that work on the same subsystem like GHB and alcohol, but otherwise it's feasible.
Otherwise, it's not as problematic, probably. Yes, as a
It's
rule.
not as problematic as right.
Yeah.